Welcome to the Strategic Expert Show. In this episode, we're going to be diving into LinkedIn. We explore strategies, best practices for leveraging LinkedIn for your personal branding as well as company growth. Whether you're an individual looking to enhance your professional presence or a company aiming to boost your brand, this episode is going to be packed with valuable insights. Our guest today was born and raised in Hawaii and was gifted many adversities as a teenager and has been in the adult world since he was 16 years old. He's been in the finance industry for most of his professional career, where he's helped over 1,000 people eliminate debt, build wealth, and work on financial education. Currently, he is a LinkedIn practitioner, speaker, audio event and live show host, and a writer. A year ago, he created his system, LinkedIn Success, which is designed to teach people how to navigate LinkedIn, gain and sustain attention there, and how to convert, because that's where he started his journey out there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Deitch. Paul, it's nice to have you on today.
Matt, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to see you again. And yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation. Happy to support you and love what you're doing here.
I appreciate this, man. I'm super excited about this. You've been talking about LinkedIn on your content for a long time. I've been kind of following you. And it's a world that I think a lot of us don't leverage nearly as much as we should. And so I wanted to kind of get into this. I wanted to do a brief introduction about you. Tell us a little bit more about your background. I know I gave a brief summary, but let's get into you a little bit. Like how did you move into this world of LinkedIn? Go through your background real quick for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So kind of like you were saying, I was born and raised in Hawaii. So my journey to LinkedIn started a little over 2 years ago. And
Okay.
for those of you that don't know, like Hawaii's like a really small place, so everybody kind of knows everyone. I didn't even know what LinkedIn was a little over 2 years ago. And it really kind of started when I moved from Hawaii to Florida, which is actually kind of how we met. I
Yeah.
started training with Grant Cardone and his executive team in at the beginning of 2022. And what I realized is that after investing 6 months on Facebook and Instagram, trying to like grow and get clients, that wasn't really working because there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. So I was like, you know, everybody was like, well, go to LinkedIn, it's more professional, but I had no idea what it was.
Right.
And I did what a lot of people do, right? You go and learn from the quote unquote expert and people who have done it. And I ended up joining a world-renowned program for financial professionals, but it didn't really pan out for me. And kind of like after investing $11,000 in learning and from other people, I was just kind of like, why don't I just create my own system? And I think what I've been able to really uncover over the past couple of years of navigating this journey on my own and creating LinkedIn success through my experience over the first year on the platform is that the way that I view it is so different than most people because I think that so many people are so caught up on what it was versus kind of what it's evolved into, which I feel like is such a great analogy for life, right? So many times you look at people for what you want them to be or what they were versus what they are. And I feel like for me, things have really changed on LinkedIn, and I'm so grateful that I only had kind of my experience moving forward because I think so many people get caught up in what things were. So yeah, it's been an absolute game changer for me. And yeah, so what you had kind of said in the bio, so before I joined LinkedIn, hadn't spoken on a podcast, didn't ever speak at like an event, do an event, didn't have a live show. All these things, I've gotten major media publication through LinkedIn. It's been an absolute game changer because it's real, right? And I think the way that a lot of people view, I call them like the unholy trinity, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, is there's a lot of kind of facades out there. People kind of show up how they want you to see them. Whereas on LinkedIn, you kind of have to show up as you are because of the professional nature. But it's really evolved into, I like to say, incorporating your personal life into your professional life. And over the past year specifically, storytelling and vulnerability has really come to the forefront. So, yeah.
That's really interesting to see how that's evolved for sure. I really appreciate that insight into it. That's a very interesting comparison between the other social medias and LinkedIn. I do know they're very, very different. And I've seen a little bit about what you're talking about of that personal life coming in. In fact, one of my cousins, probably a couple years ago now, went viral over a personal video that he posted on LinkedIn, and it went viral there before it went anywhere else. It was a very cute video of him trying to teach his son how to make a snow angel. And his son just couldn't figure it out. You might have even seen this. This was a while back where he was trying to explain to him how to do it, and the kid was basically doing jumping jacks instead of laying down in the snow and doing it. But it literally blew up and went viral because it was on LinkedIn first, which I found really fascinating. Just about just about that platform in general and how that works. So, um, why do you think LinkedIn is such an essential tool for professionals? Like, why do we need to be on there versus these other platforms?
So, over the past 3 years, I've had the privilege of training with many elite mentors in business, finance, and I've made and met so many powerful people through LinkedIn. And one of the things that I've gotten from them is that the way that they show up on LinkedIn is so different from the other platforms. Like one of the Lewis Howes for the longest time has
Yeah,
been
yeah,
like
yeah.
one of my favorite people, and I actually interact with him pretty regularly on LinkedIn.
Wow.
And the thing that's interesting about it is for a lot of these people, if you message them on like Instagram or Facebook, maybe they respond. And a lot of them have even said that if they are responding, it's usually like either like a VA or some type of
Yeah,
automation, like it's
it's
not
not
actually
them.
them. Right. Whereas like on LinkedIn, because there's potential for massive like business and collaboration, if you have some insight and if you have something that is unique, it's really easy to be an asset to a lot of these people. And I've just been blown away because one of the biggest gifts that LinkedIn has given me is a community that I've been a part of a little over the past year called the Outlier Project. And through it, I've met Olympic gold medalists, some of the top speakers, coaches, like amazing people. And the thing that's so interesting is I've been able to like be an asset to them. I've had a lot of them come on my live show. We've collaborated and done things together because they don't even realize, a lot of the power on LinkedIn. So I think the reason why it's essential is because you're connecting with real people, and I would say like professionals. The number one thing that caught my attention about the platform was how positive it was. It's not There's not a lot of negativity. People are very and they're very giving,
It's
right?
not
Like,
Twitter, is what you're saying.
well, like Twitter, Facebook. I mean, so just to kind of give you context, when I really started like being on LinkedIn, it was around the time where all these massive layoffs were happening. So like that
Right.
was actually what kind of inspired my live show, was that so many I would see these green banners like on my screen the entire time, but it wasn't depressing because these people were grateful and they were thanking people, like, and tons of people were supporting. I've seen so many people there, like when people go through financial troubles, like pay rents, and I mean just crazy stuff. It really is all about human connection there, which I feel like is a massive differentiator. And I think the other thing about it too is it's the most versatile platform, hands down. So we trained with Grant, where he talks about being
Yeah.
omnipresent. And I don't know about you, but I was trying being omnipresent, but like I was
It's
getting so
difficult.
exhausted.
It is tough
Right.
to be omnipresent, and like Grant talks about it, but what he doesn't tell you is he's got 50 people working in that marketing department.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as I was like investing an hour here, an hour there on all these platforms, and it's like once you feel like you learn it, then it changes or a new one comes up. And what really kind of intrigued me about LinkedIn is that the features that it had that a lot of people weren't talking about. So like they have an option where you can do live streaming, right? So it has that YouTube part. In terms of content, if you like photos and Instagram, you can post pictures. I know lots of people who just post picture content. if you're like Twitter and you like text, like you can just do that, long form, short form. Same with video. So it just became really diverse. And I people always say that now that there's over like a billion, quote unquote, a billion users. I don't know if I believe that because there's a lot of bots and
Yeah, there's a
crazy
lot of
stuff.
spam in there.
Yeah, for sure. But that's why I think it's essential is that it is the most versatile social media platform and it is the most underpopulated, especially if you are a professional that has a really unique industry or niche. Like there's so many people, for example, who are in real estate, but they're not teaching people about like either what they should know about real estate or how to actually like succeed there.
Right.
And there's just so many different niches and markets where people can really become one of one. And as Grant says, right, like dominate the space. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of get into that a little bit, some of these nitty gritty, because you're talking about features that people don't know are there. Let's first go into personal branding. So, everybody starts with their personal profile before they get into a business or anything else. What are the key components? What are the things we need to have a strong LinkedIn profile?
So the LinkedIn profile has definitely changed over time, but I feel like one of the biggest disconnects that I see from a lot of people that I have conversations with, whether it's like clients or people who want to collaborate or whatever it is that they design their profile based off of how they want people to see them versus who they actually are. And I just think that on LinkedIn, the genuineness, the being authentic, like that's so powerful.
Do you have an
Be-
example of that? Like, what does that mean? Like, what they want people to see versus who they are? Like, can you give an example?
Yeah, so like I have a friend, she's like an absolute genius at what she does.
Okay.
And the way that her profile was kind of designed was like the typical corporate person, but she was like an entrepreneur. So
Okay.
it's and I asked her, I was like, well, are you trying to get a job in the corporate space? And she's like, no, I just didn't know how to design it because I think it goes back to the point that we were talking about in the beginning, where so many people see LinkedIn as what it was, right? Which was like a resume holder where people go to like hire
That's how I
employees
treat it.
and
I'm
find
not gonna lie.
jobs.
That's how I treat it.
Yeah, a lot of people treat it that way, and there's just massive opportunity, especially if you've done things, you have a lot of experience and insight. There's really powerful ways that you can leverage it that so many people just aren't taking advantage of.
Interesting. Okay. So, since it is kind of a resume, but it's not, like, how do we better showcase skills, experience? Like how do you showcase that better than just having it looking like a resume?
Yeah, so great question. I would start off by saying, for me personally, I don't look at LinkedIn as like a social media platform. I look at it as a massive search engine. What a lot of people don't know is that the way that you design your profile, everything about it is searchable. So it's like if
Mm,
you're using keywords, that's actually how people can find you. Like for you, if you're in like marketing, so if you use like advertising, a lot of these like keywords that people are looking up, it's actually searchable, and that's how people can find you through the search bar on LinkedIn. When I work with clients, they'll come to me and they're so excited. They're like, "Oh, how are we going to get clients?" And I was like, "We're literally going to search for them. Like, who's your ideal client?" And they're just like, "Oh, wow. Like, I didn't realize it was that easy." And that's why LinkedIn becomes so powerful. So there's really three things that I would say to the profile on why it's really critical. And obviously, if anybody has questions, reach out and we can kind of go in
absolutely.
depth. But the first thing is the banner. When you look at somebody's profile on LinkedIn, that's the first thing that you notice. And I look at it basically as free advertising. You get to plug your website, plug some type of call to action that can like push people to something, but then also give them kind of like a what you're about, right? Whether it's like your services, whether it's your brand, whatever it is. And that's something that I see so many people not leverage, even if it's just like putting your calendar link to say like, hey, would love to have a conversation, right? Like, so that's number one. The second thing, the headline on LinkedIn becomes so important because one, everything about it is searchable, but it's actually how you attract attention and you can actually grow a following through commenting because every time that you comment on a post, people are going to see your headline. So if you're slapping like your value proposition or like what you do, and if you're commenting with insight and actually adding value, and I call them comment conversations,
Okay.
you can actually grow a pretty decent network. You can create connections. People will, and this is one of the things that I wish that I did on my journey was that I knew nothing about LinkedIn and I was like kind of arrogant and egoic. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to build it myself from the bottom. When I was like, I had all this information, there were so many people who had podcasts, live shows, stages. I could have easily just went to the top, be like, hey, I have this insight. Here's my story. Like I've helped X amount of people. You know, I feel like your people need this, and you can just go straight to the top. So that was really one of the things that I liked about it was that you had access to decision makers. Whereas I feel like on other platforms, you have to do a lot of digging, but
If you can find
the
it at all.
right, exactly. And then the third thing that I would say on the profile part is the about section.
Okay.
That's really important. And here's my like tip for everybody. You can really build it like two ways, and I've done both of them. It doesn't really matter. You either go all in on your expertise and you answer kind of like those 5W questions, like who you serve, what you do, why you do it, how you do it, and really make it so that people can sort themselves. I feel like, especially as service-based entrepreneurs, that's kind of your main goal is you're just trying to sort people on
Yeah.
social. And it's not necessarily like selling, but your goal is to have conversations. Because it's like most of the time I'm like, well, I don't even know how I could sell to you because I was like, I have to know like, are we even gonna is it gonna make sense for us to work together? Like, what are
Absolutely.
you trying to achieve? So that's the number one thing is that I really look at my profile on LinkedIn as kind of like a website because when you build it properly, you have like the, call to action, the banner thing. People get to know a little bit about who you are as a person.
Yeah, you're talking
And
keywords.
yeah,
That's SEO basically, more or less. So
yeah,
I can see why
pretty
you'd see
much.
it that way.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's, man, this is great information. Like I literally am taking mental notes. Like I need to fix that. I need to fix that. I need to fix that because I'm definitely in the category of the people you're describing. What it actually reminds me of, is almost like this is almost like a big trade show. In essence, I was just at the outdoor retailer show last week, and basically everybody's there. It's actually a private event, but everybody that's there is there to do business. So, I saw people going around and talking to each other, but they're vendors talking to each other. So somebody who is in the tent space is over walking through where all of the Chinese manufacturers have all of their booths set up. And they're looking at and very quickly walking in and going, well, do you have this strap? Can you provide this to us? And they'll do business right there. I was actually talking to a guy who literally was telling me that he was sitting down trying to consult with one of these companies, and some guy from Walmart walked up. It was a CBD company that was there, and a guy from Walmart walks up and asks him these questions, and he basically said, "Well, we don't think you qualify, but if you meet these 5 standards, you will." And the guy goes, "Well, yeah, I meet those all. I've designed this purposely to make sure I meet those 5." The guy goes, "I'll be right back." Walks away, gets on his phone, comes back and goes, "You have a contract with Walmart. We're going to get in touch with you." And like right then and there. And you saw the guy like try to be really cool about the fact that he just got a Walmart contract. But it's like LinkedIn, the way you're describing it, almost is like a digital version of that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've definitely, so we'll kind of talk about this a little more later, but like I feel like the best kept secret on LinkedIn is the LinkedIn audio events. I've
Okay.
made tens of thousands of dollars through those events. And what's so interesting is I think so many people, especially when it comes to sales and a lot of tactics, like they choose to accept other people's truths or it's like the typical averages instead of realizing that connection like really is an absolute game changer. When you actually get to know people, the 8 to 10 touches that people tell you it takes turns into like 1 to 3,
Yeah.
right? And I just remember when I started on LinkedIn, I was 25. I was an entrepreneur when it was very corporate centric. And I was in finance, which is like, everybody has their negative connotation. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
It is deceptive. Like, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of deception that goes on, but I always treated people like they were people instead of just another number. And I realized like the biggest challenge that service-based businesses have, and I'm sure you can probably relate, is like getting your foot in the door, right? Like, your portfolio, your experience. Like, if you get a conversation, you're like, yeah, I got them. But it's like actually getting your foot in the door. And that's what really kind of happened for me was I couldn't get my foot in the door because
Yeah.
everybody just wrote me off as this typical 20-year-old and all these type of things.
Well, finance is super competitive too, so that's a hard world
Right.
to break into.
Yeah, for sure. And I just realized that these audio events gave me an opportunity to let people learn a little bit more about the person behind the profile. And why I think it's so invaluable for people is because it was kind of like what I was talking about earlier with teaching. Like, when you have a lot of experience and expertise, I kind of look at it essentially as like an interactive webinar.
Yeah.
And the example that I give is like, how much more likely are you to buy from somebody when you can not only like learn a little bit more about them, what they do, why they do it, but you actually get to like go up and ask questions and interact with people. And most people are like, oh, well, probably like significantly higher. And I was like, yeah. And the fact that you can do these things at the convenience of your own home, you don't have to spend thousands of dollars like we have going to an event, have to travel and all these type of things. It's just an absolute game changer on LinkedIn for sure.
Absolutely. Let's go down the rabbit hole, man. You keep talking about this audio event, and I have no idea what that is. And so I've been dying. Like, let's figure out what is this. Explain to me what an audio event is, because I've never heard of one. I've never seen one, which shows how little time I spend on LinkedIn. So what is an audio event, and what how do you get involved in something like that?
Yeah, so it's a feature that was introduced a little over a year ago, and it's really similar to Clubhouse.
Okay.
I like to say that it's just a more professional version of Clubhouse because I've been on Clubhouse and it was chaotic a lot.
Yeah, there's some definite chaos going on over there, and Grant certainly
Yeah,
stirs the pot when he can.
yeah, for sure. And the thing, it anybody can do them as long as you have like 150 followers, I believe, on LinkedIn. So if you've been there for a while, you probably have it. The thing that I like so much about the audio events is that one, it's really powerful to like gather information, but it's just a great facilitator to not only connect with people, but do a little bit of like teaching, connect. I've used them to sell. And the biggest thing that I've noticed is like I call these audio events kind of the realest part of LinkedIn just because people are more vulnerable there. You actually get to learn about people and you see kind of like a different side of them that you wouldn't ever see on the news feed.
Okay.
So that's where it's really become kind of powerful in that aspect. And same thing too with everything that I had said about the profile. The way that you design it with the title, with the description, all these things, that's all searchable. So if you're talking about a topic that's hot, like marketing or AI, and you have like a unique title and build your description, there's probably a lot of people who are going to be interested in that. But I also know, like for you personally, Matt, you have like a ton of experience in marketing and you've achieved like results. So it's like you're not like a lot of these other quote unquote experts who don't really know what the heck that they're talking about.
My agency isn't a year old, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or it's like, you didn't like join some engagement pod or pay for some certification. Like, you've actually done the work and achieved a lot of the results. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually did in the beginning. I initially got my start through one of Ty Lopez's courses of all things. I've gone back and since gone back through that course, and I shudder at some of the advice that was given in it because I'm like, that's so wrong now. But
Yeah.
it got me going, and so I think that's important. So let's say you're going to do an audio event. Let's say you're in your finance world, you're trying to do your entrepreneurial thing. How do you approach it? How do you prep for something like that?
So for me, I like it's kind of weird and not like a winging it type of thing. I think for me, it's just I've done so many that I just like being in the moment type of thing. And I find that that's the biggest problem with a lot of these like shows and podcasts is like it's so scripted. Like you can tell that, a lot of people are like reading stuff that their team did and all these type of things. I just like to be honest with people and just be like kind of real. And I think that's why for me connection goes to like a different level than a lot of people see it because you're actually getting to know about people and connecting and just sharing. I mean, for me, I share a lot of like stories and experiences. So that becomes like really powerful. Like I said, storytelling is so powerful on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say is like just be yourself. Don't try to like, paint yourself out to be somebody that you're not. I think the funny part is that the things that we're so like insecure about or afraid of like other people are like, oh my god. Like I was talking to somebody that I had a conversation with the other day and she's like, you're like 13 years younger than me but you intimidate like the heck out of me. And I was like, what? I was like, it's all these weird things. Everybody has their own quirks. Like just be yourself and show up and just have genuine conversations. And I believe that a lot of stuff just works itself out when you do that.
Yeah, I mean, when you get around successful people and people who are doing business in the same thing you are, there are people who intimidate you. I remember the very first boot camp I went to with Grant Cardone. I was sitting at the lunch in the middle of the session. I was sitting next to the 16-year-old kid who was running a $10 million landscaping business, and I was that intimidated me. I'm like, I'm way older than you, dude, but you are crushing it compared. Like, holy crap! I had so many questions. Like, dude, how are you doing this? Like, you're 16. You're not even old enough to like have your own bank account legally at this point. Like, how are you getting loans and doing like how the heck are you making this work? So it is fascinating. I think you have a good opportunity to network with those people, and I think being real is a very big part of that. That actually reminds me, there's a story that I heard from a guy who used to be a roommate of ours, uh, and he's an actor, and he was at one of these acting parties or whatever, and he actually bumped into, I think it was Jennifer Aniston, and he didn't quite realize it was her at first, and was just talking to her, and she talked to him for a good long while because he talked to her like a regular person, not a fan, not a like he just treated her as an individual, and that made such a big difference. And I think that's been my own journey too as a marketer. I've certainly, done some podcasts with some pretty cool people. Back for one of my clients, I actually interviewed most of the cast of Alone. And I think the first couple, I was definitely a fanboy and kind of geeking out because it was crazy to talk to people that you've seen on TV. It's kind of like when you meet Grant Cardone for the first time in person. It's a little bit trippy because you're like, wow, I've seen this guy on Facebook and YouTube and videos, and actually meet him, go, you're a real person. It is always surreal to me. Um, but if you can have that level of connection with them, like all of a sudden it starts evolving into friendship and connection and humanness much more than, oh, this person's this amazing, they were on TV, they're this. And so I really like that you tend to take that route. I do think that there is too much that's scripted, and I always wonder about that. Everything I'm watching, I'm always going, okay, did they script this? Did they set this up? Even some people that are absolutely fantastic. I know, every time I watch Jocko Willink and like his podcast, he's literally holding a piece of paper, and I'm like, are you reading that, or is that show notes, or are you literally reading line by line what you wanted to say? I really don't know because they never
Yeah.
show you, but you wonder. So I like that you go for authenticity. I think that's something that's missing a lot in our current world.
Yeah, for sure. So, like, funny story. So, on my live show that I created, Impossible Equals Impossible, like the episode before Christmas, I got to interview my mentor mom that I've been training with for 2 years, Danelle Delgado, like the most inspiring person that I ever met. Like, she was the
Okay.
dream. She was the dream guest that I would have loved to have, and I did it within like 9 months or so, maybe a little less. And what's so funny about that episode is people were like, because I've been like talking about her, way before that. I mean, we had been training for probably like a little over a year together at that point. And it's those weird moments where it's like at the end of the day, as insane as it is that you get to like have a conversation, it there's a lot of things that people just do the same, right? Like I remember training with a lot of these people, they all say, yeah, but Paul, we all put our pants on the same way, or like all these things. So perspective is definitely something that's important. But I think kind of to your point, context becomes so important, right? Like you're talking about the 16-year-old, like you don't know about um maybe like the resources that he had, or like if his parents were like, gifted entrepreneurs. That's usually the case for a lot of people in that point. So context definitely matters, and everybody's just on a different journey. I always like to say, like, we all have different objectives, so it's kind of silly for one person to compare themselves to another, because it's like what your objective is and what resonates with you like may not resonate with me, and here I am like trying to be like somebody else, so
Yeah.
that's what it does for sure.
No, I 100% agree with you. And while we're kind of on this topic of being fake, there's something I wanted to ask you about, which
Yep.
is how do you appropriately reach out to somebody? Because I get hit up on LinkedIn all the time from
Mhm.
bots, from fake people, and I ignore 90% of that. So it's like, how do you actually get through to somebody outside of that? What's your strategy if you actually wanted to make an like your guess that you're trying to have? And it
Yep.
took you 9 months to get it. Like, what's your strategy to actually be able to talk to somebody that you're trying to talk to?
So great question. I would say there's one, well, I'll share like my strategy, but one thing that I'll say to like a lot of people, if you're watching this and you're getting pitch slapped, ask people one question and ask them, how is that strategy working for you? It's so funny for me, and it's probably because I've been practicing gratitude daily for going on 4 years now. Like my brain neurologically is just rewired to see where a lot of people are like complaining and challenges is just
It's
opportunity.
everywhere, man.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
unreal. I started paying attention to that, and people moan and bitch all day long.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just like, what's so funny to me is I just ask people like, how is that strategy working for you? Because kind of like what you were saying, right? You started your journey with Ty Lopez. When I invested in this program, I didn't realize that they weren't going to teach me how to use LinkedIn. It was kind of after that I realized, oh, I probably wasn't their ideal client. But it was basically like an automation campaign, right? Where
Mm.
it's like, and that's one of the reasons why I wiped like thousands of people from my LinkedIn network, because literally what they did was they looked at it from a geographical standpoint, and like, who you're trying to target, like companies, how many employees. And it's like they didn't pay attention to core values or anything like that. It was like, oh, well, they fit these metrics, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. And I mean, it worked. Like I got like meetings and clients and stuff, but what I think is interesting that I learned from that experience, because I didn't know what I was doing at that point on LinkedIn, right? Is that there's really two reasons why people do that. Number one, they have no idea what they're doing. And that's usually like the latter. But then the second thing is that a lot of these programs and courses and like people that are like quote unquote influencers and creators on LinkedIn, a lot of them utilize like engagement pods, and that's kind of, what it is. And what's funny is I would ask them like, how's that strategy working for you? And they would actually respond and have a conversation. I was like, would you like me to show you, how it is? And they're like, yes, please, or
No,
whatever.
what's an engagement pod? Because I'm not familiar with that term, and that's obviously like that seems to be something you want to avoid. So what's an engagement pod?
Yeah, so engagement pods are essentially like massive groups of people that you all have this agreement to like and comment on each other's posts.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I see that on TikTok a lot, where it's like, oh, somebody's doing a live, and oh, this person jumped on and spent money. Everybody go like their page.
Yeah, that's basically kind of what it is. And it's so funny, like just being transparent. I didn't know about engagement pods until maybe like 6 to 8 months ago when I launched my own system, because I kept coming into people who were telling me like, oh, I invested in a LinkedIn program before and it didn't work out. And I was like, can you tell me a little bit about this? Because like I haven't heard of this program.
I
And they
love
would
that as
tell
a
me,
question as a salesman, by the way. Like, well, tell me what happened. Why didn't it work?
yeah. And I was just like, I would listen to it and I was like, oh. And then I actually have a friend who's like a genius tech software guy. He actually does work and stuff on LinkedIn. He was telling me, he's like, oh yeah, Paul. He's like 100%. This is how like a lot of these people get their following. And I remember when I started, there were a lot of people that I looked up to, and I was like, wow, it's like they're doing incredible stuff. And I just found out that a lot of it was based off of, fake engagement. And
Yeah.
when it really kind of hit home for me is when I started seeing people, because for the longest time on LinkedIn, I had like a really small, but it was an intentional network, like 1,000 people. And then when I created LinkedIn Success, I was like, oh, well, if I'm going to teach, I kind of have to, expand it and let more people in. But like, even when I had 1,000 connections, I want to say like over 90% of my network had like 10 times the network that I did. But because I built it on quality and people who were great connections, it attracted a lot of people to reach out and connect with me. And the number one thing that I found was that a lot of people who had like way more multiples of following than I did were reaching out to me. And you would kind of see like what you would think success looks like, right? Like you'd see people who'd have all of the posts, like, oh, they have like thousands of comments and reactions and all these type of things, but they weren't making any money because of the engagement pod thing. It was all fake.
Yeah.
So I was just like, well, I would much rather have like one real like than 1,000 fake ones because it's like at least with that one real person, there might be an opportunity to, do something together. And that's when things really kind of changed. It definitely warped my reality for sure because there's a lot of things like with social media, with being an entrepreneur. I mean, this like PR, like all these type of things. The things that you think you always want, when you find out like how people get it, you're just like, I don't know if I really want that.
And it's not even effective. You
Yeah.
have thousands of likes, comments, and shares, and it equals zero business. Then what was the point of it?
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
I tell
I
my
have a
clients that all the
genius.
time. I'm like, hey, I could go spend 100 bucks, go get you a bunch of followers, but it doesn't mean anything. You're not going to have any clients. It's not real.
Yeah, I have a genius friend on social media that says like your following really only matters if it actually converts because it's like if you have 1 million followers, which believe it or not, like surprise, I found out a lot of these creators on like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, a lot of them like aren't making any money. Then he's like, your following is pointless. Like, who cares if you have 1 million people if you're not making any money, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what pays the bills essentially. I mean, attention's valuable to some extent, but it's like if you don't have people that would buy, then brands aren't really going to want to do business with you, right?
I,
So
I would say real attention is valuable
yeah,
because
for sure.
those pods, the bots, that's not real attention. It looks like attention, but it's not. I mean, I've gone through people's TikTok profiles before. It's like, wow, this person jumped up and suddenly they have 600,000 followers. But if you go through their list of followers, every account you click on goes, this account's been deleted. This account's been deleted. This account's been, I'm like, okay, I get it. This isn't real. They don't really have, and you can, I think honestly, in some level, with the exception of the engagement pods, but you can kind of tell when you look at people's content.
Oh
Somebody who's
yeah,
got
for sure.
600,000 followers should be getting, hundreds of comments, likes on each of their posts, just sheer numbers and statistics. But when you see them getting 3 likes, 3 comments on every single post, and they've got 600,000 followers, you're like, you're fake because none of those bots don't like those accounts. They don't follow
Yeah.
those accounts, so it's kind of easy to sniff out. And I think quality people sniff that out pretty quickly too.
Oh yeah, like on LinkedIn, the easiest way that you can tell is just like go look at people's comments. Like when you see like great posts or you see like people from like different countries, usually it's like I may get some flack for this, but like I'm just being like transparent. So I didn't realize that India and Nigeria are like massive. The demographic and percentage of LinkedIn users from there are significantly high.
Yeah,
So when I saw like a lot of these creators who got like hundreds of thousands of stuff and all these things, like a lot of the people that would show up at their events were those type of people. A lot of people that were commenting were those type of people, and I was just like, okay, yeah, this is not real because it's like I'm trying to do business with like people in the US mainly. Like
yeah. It,
this is
it
not going
depends
to
on your
serve me.
market for sure. I mean, if you've got a global economy, India is actually a treasure trove because they've got most of the world's population is over in Asia. There's a billion Facebook users. There's a billion, like, those accounts are real if you actually get followers and do like campaigns and stuff over there. they are real people, but it's just, will it work for you? If you have a local business, it's not going to work.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's like the big thing is just figuring out the my mentor shared something that really always stuck with me. And she said that how you gain the attention is how you have to keep it. So and I think that's so true, right? Like you see so many people trying to, oh, I just need to get views. So I'm gonna do like this dog or cat video. And then when you stop doing that, your people stop following you because they're like, well, I followed you for this. And I just think that that's why being genuine is just the best way to do it, because it's like if you're just showing up as yourself and being who you are and that's getting you attention, you're not really ever going to have to change that, right?
Yeah.
So
Look at how many stars have gone through that. They all came up and we liked them for what they were. And then they tried to go in a different direction, and all of a sudden they're going downhill because nobody cares about this new fake thing that they're doing.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man. So let's get in real quick. Like some common mistakes that people make on LinkedIn that you see. Like what are some common things that are just like, hey, don't do this?
I would say the most common mistake that I see people make on LinkedIn is like not adding depth to comments. One of like my biggest pet peeves is when people say great post, and it's like before I remember I used to get so upset, but now I just like gather myself, right, practicing the gratitude and the grace, just be like, oh, why did you think it was a great post? And it's like the thing that's so interesting on LinkedIn is that the main objective, right? And we kind of talked about this earlier, is conversations. So that's definitely the first one. I look at you had talked about earlier. I'll go back a bit on like what is my strategy for like connecting with people.
Yeah.
So when I created my system, it was really kind of like a four-step process and everything was interconnected. It was profile optimization because everything begins and ends with your profile on LinkedIn. Then the second thing is commenting, because unlike the other social media platforms, commenting is actually like a mutual benefit on LinkedIn, where it's like when you comment on somebody else's post, you introduce yourself to their network, and then you're also introducing that person to your network. So it's like in the beginning, I was training with Grant Cardone and I didn't really know what I was doing. So he was like one of the people that I would comment, and he had like 600,000 people or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I had nobody essentially. So when you would do that, I got introduced to like 600,000 people. And it's like a lot of people, when there's alignment, whether it's like you follow the same things or people actually like read your comments on there. So if you're adding things of value, people will reach out to you. Like I've gotten business through comments, I've collaborations, all these type of things. And the way that I look at commenting essentially on there, that's really kind of like my main connection strategy, I would say, is I look at commenting as kind of like a first impression, because of that comment feature, I don't feel like anything that I do on LinkedIn is cold. I know how to make it warm through
Yeah.
commenting. So that's the biggest thing that I would say. And going back to the mistakes, so the first one was the great post. The second mistake, and I think this is actually really important, is LinkedIn is not like Facebook. So Facebook really pushes like the whole groups thing. I talk to
Mm-hmm.
so many people who've invested tens of thousands of dollars on agencies and courses and people to teach them LinkedIn. And I'm surprised that so many of them are telling people to post in groups, because the way that LinkedIn works is that they only boost one post at a time, and it's always your most current post. But because people on LinkedIn are like professionals and we go direct, it's not like Facebook where you want like your own little group and you can put information and people like engage or whatever. If people want to know something about you on LinkedIn, they're just going to direct message you. And I think that what I started noticing is that a lot of people were doing the right things. Like they were commenting, they were adding value and insight in their posts, and they were like, why am I not getting reach? And what happens is like if you just leave it and you post on your personal and you're like commenting, you're putting out value, like you're probably going to get a decent, reach if you're putting out like actionable, good content that's going to help people advance.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then what would happen though is that how it works is after you post your to your own page, then it'll say, oh, would you like to post this in so and so group? And a lot of people will say, oh yes, I want to do that, but they don't actually know the nuances and the intricacies about it. And that was the thing for me that I learned, like, oh, LinkedIn's really intricate. It's not necessarily like complicated, but there's these small little things that if you don't know about them, it completely changes everything about growing and um, ga- gaining attention and visibility.
It's interesting you mentioned that about, like, hey, do you want to post this in this group? I've kind of tend to shy away from anything that the platform is suggesting I do. I found this with Facebook too. Anytime Facebook's like, hey, do you want to boost this post? I always tell a client, never boost from the front end. If you actually want to promote one, you have to go in through the back end through ads manager and like adjust it. Because if you just do it through the front, that's how Facebook's taking money from you. You're a sucker. So I could see LinkedIn kind of being the same way where you disagree with that strategy of the groups. They're basically doing the same thing. Hey, post this here.
Yeah.
And it's not actually getting you the result you're looking for.
Yeah, well, because I think if you look at, so one of the things that I've noticed about LinkedIn, because everybody that I help has like one of three problems. They either don't know what they're doing on the platform and they need help navigating it. They're not getting attention, or they're like not able to sustain it, or they're not making any money. And I think when you look at the services and all the additional stuff that LinkedIn offers, they don't really teach you how to use any of it, right?
Yeah.
Like tons of people pay for premium, but I'm like, do you even know how to use it? They're like,
I
nope,
paid for it
don't.
for a while. I had no clue how to use it.
Yeah, for sure. I
The
mean,
only
it's the
thing I knew
same.
is that when I applied for a job or applied for a situation, it pushed me to the top, and that was all I knew about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for like Sales Navigator, and people are paying like almost $2,000 a year for that. So it's
Hmm.
like it was just interesting for me how a lot of people just don't know what they're doing there. And yeah, I even see a lot of these creators like, we're all just trying to figure it out. Funny story, when we were in 10X, I actually got to have a conversation with Alan,
Yeah.
Grant's person. And I was curious about LinkedIn, and he's like, he's like, I don't know if things changed because this was like a couple years ago, but at the time he was like, we really don't know what we're doing there. And then I kind of found out that, a lot of the high end people, like they would use the influencers who manage their accounts or whatever. But like most people don't know what they're doing there. And I think that's where it's really helped me, is the fact that I've created essentially this system that, regardless of how much the platform has changed over the past 2 years, and I always laugh because I hear these creators, oh, my reach is going down, I'm losing followers, this or that, and I'm just like, my numbers have only gone up, because I think when you focus on actual, like, creating connection and building relationships with people, it doesn't matter what's going to happen on the platform. Like, you can survive and thrive through it.
Absolutely. All right, man. Here, I want to end on a good note here. So, do you have any really good success stories from any of your clients that you could share?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I had a client, one of my first one-on-one clients actually. Before we started working together, she had less than, I want to say, like 100 connections on LinkedIn. And she really didn't kind of know how to communicate her story and her expertise. And within like a couple weeks of us working together, she not only like doubled her network and growth, but she managed to get like a designation of a top voice badge on LinkedIn. And what
Wow.
was interesting is that now they offer it through like these collaborative AI articles. And what blew me away was, and this is kind of going back to the beginning about why I feel like every entrepreneur should be there, is it is the one social media platform where your following like does not matter, right? And what it really proved me at that point was, okay, she had like less than 200 followers, but yet she was a top voice in a very congested coaching space, right? So that's what really showed me that at the end of the day, it really does come down to your content and your experience there. You can come on and have like know nothing about LinkedIn. Obviously, like I had to put in a lot of reps to get to this point, but that was the biggest thing for me, was that, and I think with what I do now, serving the 50 plus age demographic mainly, it's helping a lot of people who have the experience and the expertise, but they just don't know how to unlock their brilliance through technology
Yeah.
is actually showing them how to do that and just share their story. You know, at the end of the day, business is about monetizing a story, right?
Yeah.
That's why people do business with certain people. It's usually the story. And I always like to think about connection from a personal standpoint. And where a lot of people on LinkedIn go wrong is they try to start professionally before personally. But I mean, everybody knows that connection happens personally. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. In fact, the last episode we did with Cody Fontenot, he talked about, one of the things he encourages people to do is have relationships above all else and having that personal connection, because the health and the wealth are important. But if you have, your health, you don't have money and you have no relationships, you're probably not going to have your health long. If you have money, but no health and no relationships, that's lonely and miserable and you're sick and it sucks. Versus if you have relationships, even if you don't have the other stuff, you can get there. And everybody says your network is your net worth. But it has to be real. And I think that's the biggest thing I've really gotten out. I got so much out of talking to you today, man. It's been absolutely fantastic. But I've really gotten out of that is to try to be your real self, try to have that human connection with these people that you're trying to. I know I've experienced that a couple of times. In fact, I met somebody who knew who I was from LinkedIn. It was actually Matt Smith, which I had connected with him on LinkedIn. He's a guy who worked with Grant Cardone, an undercover billionaire, and
Nicest
I
guy.
super nice. And I followed him, kind of been part of the comments, just like you said. But I actually bumped into him at GrowthCon, I think a couple years ago, in the middle of the pre-party, the registration party, and he actually like recognized me and knew who I was. I was like, that would never have happened if I'd have tried to follow him on Facebook or on like Instagram. Like that, there was no way that was even a possibility. But LinkedIn, I think it's an untapped potential that most of us are missing out on.
Yeah, for sure. Like 100%. I mean, so in terms of like real success stories, so my community that I was talking about earlier, the Outlier Project, I actually got introduced to that community through service. So my favorite thing that I love to do on LinkedIn is connect people. I always like to laugh because people are like, how what they really think about like being a thought leader and stuff on LinkedIn. It's like creating content and doing all this stuff, but really it's about like connecting people. I've gotten so many connection requests and stuff just from like tagging people in comments and collaborations and all these type of things. And what's so funny is the community is the outlier project. And I feel like I've been an outlier my entire life. And the way that I got in was there was a guy that I met through an audio event, and he was talking about like fruit. And he shares this like interesting analogy about how you'll never see an orange tree try like bearing apples, right? Like just do
Right.
be like who you are type of thing. And obviously I was born and raised in Hawaii, so that like really kind of connected. He and I hopped on a conversation after, and he has this like fascinating story. He's coming on my live show at some point, and he was trying to like grow his book and speak more. And I had just connected him with probably like 5 or 6 people, and then he's like, you need to join this community. Like these people are outliers, and that's where I was saying like I've met Olympic gold medalists, some of the top like speakers last year. What really stood out to me that kind of blew me away is I got to have a conversation with the number one leadership coach in the world, Dr. Carol Kaufman. She has been teaching at Harvard for like 30 plus years. And what blew me away is that she was blown away by the questions that we asked. And then she used the word I don't know, probably more than like any person that I had ever met. And that's when it made me realize like the things that people think that ruin their credibility actually elevate it to a point where people just respect you for being honest, because it's such a rare thing nowadays.
Yeah, that
And
ability to say I don't know is that there's a lot of pressure, especially if you're in that position already. I mean, she's very successful, very well renowned, and so people would
yeah,
expect her to have the answer. So for her to go, I don't know, is actually powerful.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Paul, it's been great having you on today. We definitely want to have you back in the future. Really, really appreciate your time. I got so much out of this. I know anybody else who listens to this is going to. we're going to go ahead and link to you through LinkedIn in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Paul, get more info on how to improve themselves, their links, everything else, go ahead and go down in the show notes. We'll also tag Paul in any of our social media so you can go find him. Absolutely wonderful having you on, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, Matt, thank you so much. It's great to catch up again. I know it's been a little over a year since we saw each other at GrowthCon. Great, love what you're doing, and yeah, really grateful to serve. And thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.